Welcome back to Howl-O-Ween. I am your host, Barkey J. Dog, and this time we're taking a further look at that Halloween staple, the haunted house. I have 3 more movies to share about haunted houses in this one. All 3 are really good spookers. So let's get into it. First up is a personal favorite of mine, 1944's The Uninvited. Now, The Uninvited is really more of a mystery, but it blends that mystery with some spookery very masterfully. In this one, a young Ray Milland and his sister are vacationing when they find this big old house. On the spur of the moment, they decide to buy it, but there's a young girl who doesn't want them to because it was her mother's house. Her mother was Mary Meredith, the wife of an artist. But Milland and his sister buy the house from the girl's grandfather anyway, who seems happy to be rid of the place, and they set to work fixing it up. The young girl, Stella Meredith, is strangely drawn to the house, and Ray Milland is not so strangely drawn to the lovely Stella. Before long, ghostly goings-on start happening when they hear a woman sobbing in the night, and one room in the house always feels cold, damp, and depressing. The ghost wants Stella around, but it seems to want to kill her. But then it doesn't, but then it seems like it does. Milland and his sister are determined to figure out the history of the house and determine what all the spookery is about. They uncover a tragic story and family secrets with Stella at the center of both. And in the end, Milland must face the wrath of the malevolent ghost haunting the place and try to drive it out. This one is a real classic and one of the first movies to take spookery seriously as a topic. There are a few overtones from Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca in The Uninvited, with the devoted to the point of crazy devotee of Mary Meredith who now runs a sanitarium. It's beautifully photographed and there are some standout performances. Besides Ray Milland, we have Ruth Hussey as his sister, and she's very good here. And we have Donald Crisp as the imposing grandfather. And Alfred the butler from Batman, Alan Napier, plays the town doctor. And Stella is played by the painfully beautiful Gail Russell in her first major role. She only made some 20-odd pictures in her career, and her ultimate fate is one of the true Hollywood tragedies. But here she's phenomenal. There's just something about her, and you can't help but sympathize with her character, Stella Meredith. This movie also added a piece of music to popular culture. Milland's character is a composer, and he pens a piece for Stella called To Stella by Starlight. Yeah, I see you, Ray Milland. Yeah, he was mackin'. Can't blame him, though. Lyrics were later added by Ned Washington, and the song became a popular jazz standard. Criterion released The Uninvited a few years ago, and the film looks great on their Blu-ray. Very highly recommended. Next up, we have The Hearse from 1980. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this movie is about a possessed car like Christine or The Car. But you'd be wrong. The hearse, in this case, appears a few times and chases our heroine around a bit, but it's really incidental. No, this story is about the house and the mystery surrounding the heroine's dead aunt who haunts the place. See, in this one, there's a school teacher from the big city who's just off a bad marriage. Her aunt, as well as her mom, just croaked, and she's on the verge of Looney Tune Town. So she decides to go to the country and spend time in her dead aunt's house to decompress. That's when the spooky stuff starts happening. There's glimpses of a ghost in mirrors, doors slam closed, there's strange noises, all that kind of thing. Then the hearse appears and chases her down the road, parks outside her house, and generally harasses her. She blames the local lawyer for all of this, figuring he wants the house for himself, which he does. But then she starts having these weird dreams. Later, she meets a strange but impossibly handsome dude and falls for him, leading to makeouts. But the weird spooky stuff keeps happening. The Hearse stars Trish Van Vere, who appeared in a lot of movies in the 70s and 80s. Arguably, her biggest claim to fame, or one of them, was that she was married to George C. Scott. They appear together in several pictures. The Hearse also stars the legendary Joseph Cotten as the local lawyer. He doesn't have much to do here, sadly. This was at the tail end of his career when he was appearing in things like Fantasy Island and The Love Boat. But he's here, and while he looks a little tired, he gives a fair account of himself. And the last familiar face is this guy, Zahn from Star Trek the Motion Picture. Don't remember him in that? Well, that's because they killed him right off at the beginning with a transporter accident. See, at the time they were planning to make Star Trek Phase 2, a new TV show. They weren't sure they could get Leonard Nimoy back, so David Gettero was slated to play a replacement for Spock, a young Vulcan named Zahn. But when they turned the TV series into a movie instead and got Nimoy on board, they simply killed Zahn off because they didn't need him. Man, that poor guy, he got screwed. Anyway, he's here as the weird, handsome guy who romances Trish Van Vere. There's a great Blu-ray edition of this picture put out by Vinegar Syndrome that has some nice extras, including an interview with Gettero talking about the Hearse. And finally, oh boy, we have the Changeling, also from 1980, and also with Trish Van Vere. But this movie is a lot more substantial than The Hearse. Probably the penultimate haunted house movie after the Amityville Horror. This one stars George C. Scott in a fantastic performance, and the movie has been called the scariest movie ever made. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, especially today, but it's still a very fine spooker nonetheless. Like the Uninvited or The Legend of Hell House, this one creates an atmosphere of mystery and tension that helps drive the story, and it's loosely based on a real haunting that supposedly happened in Denver, Colorado. Anyway, George C. Scott plays a music professor and composer. His wife and daughter have just been killed in a car crash, which Scott witnessed. His world having fallen apart, he takes a job in Seattle at the local university. He rents a giant old house from the Historical Society, hoping to come to terms with the tragedy and get on with his life. But then, spookery starts happening. First as a slow boil, then as a full-on haunting. There's a ghost in the house trying to communicate with Scott. It wants a dark secret revealed and wants Scott to help make that happen. The ghost is angry and not above using fear or violence to get its way. It's amazing to me, but the house in the movie never existed in the real world. The outside is just a facade constructed around a dilapidated structure that was slated for demolition, and the interiors are also not real. See, you'd swear they rented a period mansion somewhere for the interiors, but they didn't. They're all sets, and it looks fantastic. You don't see this level of detail anymore. In the cast, aside from Scott and Vere, we have Mervyn Douglas from The Vampire Bat, a movie we talked about in another Howl-O-Ween video. He plays the elderly senator harboring a dark family secret, and there's several familiar faces who make appearances. Jean Marsh from Upstairs Downstairs plays Scott's dead wife. Eric Christmas is here as well, who we last saw in The Philadelphia Experiment. Barry Morse from Space 1999 cameos as a parapsychologist. The movie also features a small role with John Colicos, who was Kor the Klingon from Star Trek and Baltar from Battlestar Galactica. Here he plays a plainclothes police captain. The movie creates a melancholy atmosphere of sadness that you rarely see, especially in a horror picture. There's no blood, no gore, no jump scares. This movie doesn't need them. It's that good. This is easily a 4-paw picture if you ask me, or at least 3.5 anyway. Highly recommended. Severin Films has released an excellent Blu-ray edition of The Changeling that has a lot of extras and interviews with the production team. You should definitely get yourself a copy of that if you love this moody spooker. More haunted houses are on the way, among other things, so stay tuned for that. You can watch part 1 of my look at haunted house movies here. And down there, you can see last year's Halloween offerings. Join me next time as Howl-O-Ween continues.